What if I told you that Ferrari discovered something at Monza that was not in their simulations? And that completely shocked Frédéric Vasseur when he saw what Lewis Hamilton was capable of doing with the SF26. Because we are not talking about a simple fast lap. We are talking about internal data, real telemetry, a performance that completely breaks with what Ferrari had seen so far in the season, and that could change absolutely everything before Miami. The big question is, has Hamilton just unlocked Ferrari's true hidden potential? Or are we facing an illusion that can explode at the most critical moment of the championship? Ferrari could no longer hide, and the beginning of the season had left more doubts than certainties around the SF26, a car that in theory should consolidate the team's growth, but which on the track had shown very specific deficiencies that were repeated weekend after weekend. It was not a general problem, it was not a slow car in all scenarios, it was something more complex, even more dangerous because the weaknesses were very focused on key areas such as straight-line efficiency and management of the hybrid system, two factors that in the new technical era are absolutely decisive for competing at the highest level. That's why Monza was not a simple filming day. Ferrari turned it into a real laboratory, an environment where they could put under pressure each of the new parts, each adjustment, each change in the engine map, in the power delivery, in the aerodynamics. The choice of the circuit was no coincidence, because Monza punishes exactly the weak points of the SF26, and if the car was going to respond, it had to do it there, where there is no room to hide anything. The day was designed with almost surgical precision. Charles Leclerc opened the day, complying with the established program, collecting data, validating sensations, building a base on which to compare everything that would come later. His laps did not set off alarms, but neither did they generate that reaction that Ferrari needed. It was a correct performance, within what was expected, without surprises. And that, at that moment, was almost a problem because what the team was looking for was not stability, it was a sign that the car could give something more. And then it was Hamilton's turn. This is where the act begins to completely change tone, because what seemed like a continuation of the program became something completely different. From the first laps, the engineers began to see differences that were not in the script. We didn't just talk about times, we talked about how the car was being used, how it behaved in critical areas, how Hamilton was finding performance in places where it simply didn't exist before. Each lap began to build a narrative that within the garage became increasingly difficult to ignore. Because when the data began to consolidate, it was no longer an anomaly, it was no longer a punctual return, it was a pattern. A pattern that indicated that the SF26, with the improvements introduced, could operate in a completely different performance window than what they had seen up to that point. And that is where the most important element of this act appears, the internal surprise. Ferrari did not expect that jump. Not at that moment, not under those conditions, not with the limitations of a filming day. And when a team at this level is surprised by its own data, it's because something really important is happening. Because it's not just about the car being faster, it's about the overall behavior of the car beginning to align with what the engineers had been looking for weeks, perhaps months, without achieving it on the track. What Vasseur and his team began to see at that moment was something that completely changes the perception of a season. The real possibility that the problem was not the car itself, but the inability to exploit it correctly until now. And that's what makes this moment a complete turning point, because if Hamilton has been able to find that performance, then the question stops being whether Ferrari can improve, and becomes how much real potential has been hidden all this time inside the SF26 without anyone managing to get it out. Ferrari urgently needs to understand. Because it is one thing for Hamilton to set better times, and quite another for the data to begin to reveal that the car is running in a completely different window than expected. And that's where everything inside the garage changes tone, because they are no longer validating improvements. They are trying to explain something that does not fit with their own development logic. The engineers begin to delve deeper, to break down each sector, each phase of the turn, each braking point, each activation of the hybrid system. And what they find isn't a simple room for improvement, it's a structural difference in how the car delivers performance. Hamilton was not only faster overall, he was finding time in exactly the areas where Ferrari had suffered the most all season. Long straights, low load areas, acceleration phases where the energy deficit had been evident. That's where the SF26 suddenly begins to respond. Ferrari then begins to exchange data in real time with Maranello, comparing simulations with what is happening on the track. And there appears another critical point. The correlation begins to improve. That means the improvements don't just work. They work better than expected. And when that happens, the impact is not only in the present, it is in everything that comes after, because it validates a line of development that could completely change the competitiveness of the team in the next races. But there is a detail that makes all of this even more delicate. and that is the context in which it occurs. This is not a race weekend, there is no qualifying pressure, there is no traffic, there is no direct fight. It is a controlled environment. And yet, the jump is big enough to alter the car's internal perception. That's what really worries Vasseur, because he knows that if this data is confirmed in real conditions, Ferrari would not only have taken a step forward, it would have completely changed its position on the grid. And this is where the act reaches its most critical point, because the question stops being technical and becomes strategic. What does Ferrari do with this information? Because now they have two paths. Either they interpret this data as a clear sign that the SF26 has much greater potential than previously seen, and reorganize their entire approach around this, or they hesitate, consider it an isolated case, and risk not exploiting an advantage that could be decisive. What Vasseur understood at that moment is that they were no longer simply developing a car. They were discovering something that could redefine their entire season. Because after the initial shock, after the deep analysis, comes the most uncomfortable moment for any team. Making decisions based on something that breaks everything they thought they knew about their own car. Frédéric Vasseur is no longer simply looking at data, he is facing a new reality. And that reality is clear. The SF26 is not the limited car that they had interpreted in the first races. It is a single-seater that, under certain conditions, can operate at a much higher level. The problem is that performance hasn't been consistent, it hasn't been evident, and now it depends on understanding exactly what Hamilton did differently to unlock it. This is where the focus completely shifts to the immediate future, because Ferrari knows that the next big test point will not be in a controlled environment like Monza. It will be in Miami, in real conditions, with pressure, with direct competition, with the entire ecosystem of a Formula One weekend. And that makes what they discovered in Monza a high-risk bet. Because if Ferrari is correct in reading this data, if it manages to transfer that performance to the race, we would not be talking about a simple improvement. We would be talking about a change in hierarchy. A team that seemed to be chasing could suddenly put itself in a position to attack. But if they are wrong, if that data is not replicated, the blow can be even harder, because they will have built internal expectations about something that was not sustainable. And in the middle of all this appears the most delicate element of all: internal management. Because what happened at Monza not only changes the perception of the car, it also changes the dynamics between drivers. Hamilton was not only faster, he was the one who found the key. And that, within a team like Ferrari, has enormous weight. Because it implies that development, decisions, even technical direction, could begin to revolve around what he is feeling and contributing. This does not mean displacing Leclerc, but it does introduce a new variable into the equation. Ferrari now has two ways of interpreting the car, and one of them has just shown that it can extract more performance in critical areas. And when that happens, the team can't ignore it. Vasseur understands this perfectly. This is not just a technical moment, it is a strategic turning point. Because from here on, every decision Ferrari makes will be influenced by what they saw at Monza. Every improvement, every adjustment, every development direction will have as a reference that unexpected performance that appeared in Hamilton's hands. And this is where the event closes with the biggest mystery of all, the one that defines everything to come. Was Monza the beginning of the true version of the SF26? Or simply a mirage at the perfect moment? Because if it was real, Ferrari has just found something that can change the season. But if it wasn't, the blow may be even bigger than all the doubts they had before. Now, if you want to take this script to the next level, I recommend expanding the first block, because that is where we can delve even deeper into the context, the technical details, and the hidden keys that make all of this have even more weight and credibility. Frédéric Vasseur is not shocked by a stopwatch, he is shocked by what is behind that stopwatch. Because of the consistency of the data, because of the way the car responded in areas where it previously failed, because of the feeling that suddenly all the pieces start to fit together. And that's what makes this moment so critical, because it's not about getting better, it's about discovering that maybe you were never as far away as you thought. But at the same time, this revelation comes with enormous pressure. Because now Ferrari can no longer hide behind technical excuses, it now knows that the performance is there, and that forces it to execute at the highest level. Every decision from this point on has more weight, more risk, more consequences. What Monza left behind was not a definitive answer. It was a much more dangerous question. Can Ferrari turn this discovery into real performance when it really matters? Because if the answer is yes, this could be the beginning of a complete transformation within the team, a turning point that changes the narrative of the entire season. But if the answer is no, then everything they saw in that data will become a missed opportunity, a reminder that potential without execution means absolutely nothing. And there is the final key to everything: Ferrari has already seen what it can be. Now it has to show that it can sustain it. If you want to take this script to an even higher level, I recommend expanding the first block, because there we can go even deeper into the technical and strategic foundations that make this moment have an even greater impact. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.